Mr Chair, we will be supporting this bill, but there are some concerns that have arose for me, some concerns that I want to put to the Minister, along with some questions. One thing that came up last night by Mr Harawira was in relation to the fact that a lot of these people undertaking this work that is explicitly outlined in this bill are Māori and Pacific. So we are looking after our workforce as well, making sure that this bill actually addresses their needs also. And one thing that I feel, Mr Chair, is that the tone of the bill is largely in relation to protection of the public, which is definitely an aspect of it. But I also think that an important part of the bill is that it does provide for training. It does legislate that training must be put into place to ensure that the people undertaking this work are not only accountable to the public, but they're actually better equipped to actually be able to undertake these positions. So I just wonder whether there is some room, some scope for change there to ensure that that's also something that comes across in the bill, that we get to see that it's not just for protection of the public, because a lot of these people undertaking these roles are good people. The vast majority have had no problems. The vast majority have been safe in their roles and have done a service to the public. So it's good that the tone actually illustrates that, and illustrates that this bill is actually there to protect them so that they can do their job well and safely also. Just going through it, I couldn't find, and I could be wrong, but I was just asking a couple of my colleagues as well, I couldn't find a regulatory impact statement. So just asking the Minister if there is a regulatory impact statement that goes along with this bill, and if so, where it is, because I couldn't find it with the actual bill itself. Mr Chair, one thing that has come up has been the SOP that's been presented to the House by the National Government, which will exempt certain groups from this particular legislation. And just as I was reading through, I was wondering about Pacific wardens and also Māori wardens, and wondering whether or not they would be exempted from this bill, keeping in mind that they are volunteer. I think they're volunteer. Let me know if I'm wrong. But a lot of them actually do take on the role of crowd controller and property guards, and that could be considered to be actually part of what this legislation is pushing for. So I'd like to know from the Minister whether those two groups, Pacific and Māori wardens, will be groups that will potentially be exempted from this legislation, and also what other groups he has in mind that will be exempted from this particular bill. Initially, Mr Chair, the other night when we were debating this bill in the House, I did have a concern also around the level of discretion that the licensing authority would have with regards to granting the licence or certificate to the actual security guards, crowd controllers, bouncers, whatever particular people fall into these categories. And I have gone through, and it seems broad, but it does seem that there will be a level of discretion. But I'd just like confirmation also about that from the Minister. And one example that was sent through to me was of someone who, in his early years, committed a very serious crime, that being murder. That was at the age of 16, and then he went to jail at 17. But that was committed in the early 90s. He's been out of jail for the last 8 years. He has not committed any crime ever since, and he's been practising as a security guard at a bar ever since then. So I do wonder whether or not their discretion would extend to that kind of situation in terms of allowing them to continue practising, considering that he has done for 8 years, despite the fact that that will be on his record for life. But whether in those cases, although I'm sure there will be few of those cases, but in those cases whether or not they will actually, the licensing authority may actually use their discretion to allow them to continue, and also allow them to actually gain the qualification necessary in these particular roles. Keeping in mind that some of these people have been working in these jobs for long periods of time, and and for some of them, like the example I've just used, that's the only actual, Mr. Chair?
Called Carmel Cipollone.
That's the only actual occupation that person's ever known. So I do wonder what level of discretion the licensing authority will have. I discussed this particular case that I'm talking about now with someone earlier, and it was raised with me that would be the exception rather than the norm. But I do think that the licensing authority needs to have the ability to make decisions on a case-by-case basis and to have that actual discretion to grant an exception for exceptional cases like the one that I'm discussing. Mr. Chair, the provisions in general, we do support the bill. It was something, as was mentioned earlier, that was introduced to the House by Mr. Cosgrove in 2008, and it is unfortunate that it's taken a while to actually push through. I understand that the rationale for pushing it through now was to have it in place by June 2011 so that all of the provisions can be put into place before the Rugby World Cup, and I think that that is a good move, but I also think it could have been something that was done earlier, especially when it's the safety of the public that was the initial reason for this bill, and it's something that perhaps we should have pushed along with, or the government should have pushed along with a little bit more quickly, but that's okay, it's going through now. Mr. Chair, the other issue that was raised earlier by my colleague Jacinda Ardern was with regards to our concern that the clause that we're concerned that Nationals members on the Select Committee deleted a clause which would make it an offence for private investigators to photograph or record people without consent. And that's a very real concern that we have on this side of the House, and we do hope that that's something that the other side will address. I think we've got an SOP out to address that, so we're hoping that the other side of the House will support that SOP. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.